Thanks. How are you?
I am good. I'm good. Thank you. And thank you for coming here and join us at Weston Power with our Educational Community Civic Series. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I really
I,
appreciate a time to chat with you.
yeah, and I know that my calendar, I just sent you the Zoom link, like I was running behind. So thank you so much for your
Oh
patience.
my God. No, like I said, I appreciate an opportunity to chat with you. So don't even,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So if you don't have any questions, we can get started.
Sure. Let's.
Okay. All right, great. So now, Tracey, so I know, as I have been researching, we've been talking, and I know, some about you, but for someone who don't know who Tracey Reed is, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. So I am Tracey Reed. I am a native Pittsburgher. A former teacher. I've spent 13 years in Pittsburgh public schools with my children. I think the thing that is most sort of impactful for me is that I attended a high quality, um, all Black, all low income elementary school when I was just a kid. And that, having been in that environment for the very beginning part of my schooling, let me know that that's possible. And so I feel like not a respecter of persons. If it was possible then for me, then it's possible now for kids, and not just like a few students doing well in a school, but an entire school that's really dedicated to students achieving high academic standards. So that's the thing that has sort of driven me throughout my career. As a teacher, I didn't take the excuse that kids were at on a lower academic track as a reason to not challenge them academically. When as I grew older, as I worked in child protection, and again, I have a real heart for kids who are part of that child protection system, but and I just believe that kids deserve the very best quality education that they can. They all deserve the highest quality education.
Yeah.
So yeah, I earned a PhD in education policy, and I was on faculty at Ohio University for a little while. So I've most of my life has been uh, most of my professional life has revolved around education, and certainly most of my life I've been a person who believes that every kid deserves to be in a place where they're safe and they're loved, and they are pushed academically, because we can all do it.
Yeah, yeah. And you have, I mean, you have planned your life around youth,
Yeah.
around children. So, I mean, so this isn't something new. You were a school teacher, a professor, so this passion isn't something that just, morphed. This is something that that have been part of your life for years, so yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for that. And now, so you're running for Pittsburgh Public School Board, District 5.
Yes.
And so, Tracey, can you tell us what communities need to be hearing what you have to say, knowing who you are, and also what schools consist of District 5?
Sure. So the communities are Hayes, Lincoln Place, Greenfield, Hazelwood. Those are the entire communities. And then part of District 5 is a small part of South Oakland, small part of South Squirrel Hill. And the schools are Greenfield Elementary, Mifflin, K-8, and Minnedale, K-5.
Wow.
So they're all. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And I hope our listeners is hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I left out Somerset, Swiss Helm Park, and Glen Hazel.
Okay. Okay.
Communities. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that. And so I want to ask you, with your passion from coming from the school, coming from a professor, coming from your passion in your background. What do you plan, or what is your vision to take to the school board?
Well, so there are like, the thing about education is when it comes down to brass tacks, what works for kids and moving them academically, we know we have some pretty good evidence that certain things work. We know that it works for kids. They move academically when they're actually engaged in the subject matter. We know that excellent teaching moves kids further than almost any other thing we can do in a school. And that's classroom practice, right? We know that kids have to feel physically, emotionally, and intellectually safe in order to grow academically. So what works, we know a lot of what works. And what happens though, is we get sidetracked with a lot of other things. And my goal is really to move us back to, what do we know works for kids every day when they show up to school? What are those practices that we need to engage in that we know help to move them academically, and just leave all the noise behind and focus on what's actually going to move kids academically.
Yeah. And thank you so much for that. Thank you. Now, if Tracey, if you had if it was just your vision and you had a magic wand and you can change, or you can add, or you can keep the same about the school board, what would that be?
About the school board or the school district?
The school district.
The school district. Okay. So one of the things that I would definitely change is we are it feels like to me that many adults in our school district don't believe fundamentally that some kids can be successful. And I say that, and I know that sounds really harsh, but I say that because lots of people say that the progress that we're making right now is okay. And it absolutely is not. You can't, on the one hand, believe that kids can achieve to high standards, and on the other hand, say that what we're doing is okay. And so one of the things that I would do is all three of the things are really working on adults. I would make sure that we introduce ideas to adults that let them know that kids who are poor, kids who are Black, kids who are English language learners, kids who are Latinx, kids who have exceptionalities, that all kids have the ability to learn to high levels. We just as adults have to set up the environment, and we have to put in place the systems, and we have to provide for them the materials that's going to help them do that. So that's one thing. Like, sort of, I believe that fundamentally we need to change the minds of lots of adults in our school system. I think that I know that we have about nearly 22,000 students, and we have the physical capacity for about 39,000 students. So we have to begin to think about how to reorganize schools, but reorganize them in a way that again focuses on what is good practice, what is it that we know is going to move kids academically, and reorganize schools around those things. Lots of us want to bring lots of programs into schools, and they are all, and that's great, and they help a great deal, but we're not going to get out of this place we are. We're not going to get out of it with programs. We have to fundamentally change the way we do school. And so the second thing I would do is just reorganize the schools around what we know works for kids. And then the third thing is we give a lot of lip service to community engagement, family engagement, parent engagement. But the truth of the matter is that oftentimes our schools are not very friendly when parents show up in ways that are not, that don't sort of speak to or not comfortable with, they don't act like upper income, middle income, white professional people. When parents show up their authentic selves, especially when they show up in defense of their children, schools by and large don't like that. And so that's the other thing that I feel like we need to really work on, recognizing the humanity of the communities that surround our schools, our children, and their families. And if we can do that, then I think the other two things really fall into place. Then we'll begin to organize schools around what's good practice, and we'll begin to raise our expectations for all kids.
Wow. And you know what, I'm gonna tell you what stands out for me, that, making sure that parents is seen when they are being their authentic self, being seen at the same level as anyone else, as anyone race, as anyone income, as anyone, because that's not what happens. And I'm so glad you touched on that, because what happens is, they're loud, they're angry, they're, we are disrespectful. So I'm so glad that your focus is on, let's make sure that everyone is treated, regardless of how they come, this is who they are. Absolutely. So thank you so much. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
And so now you were saying about the programs and that's not everything that's needed to make this huge change. Now, what do you think about the curriculum? So does that add on to the curriculum, what you're saying, or what should the parents know about a curriculum that what you're thinking about?
So one of the things that we know that works is, we know that it works for kids to be challenged academically. Now, and that's a difficult thing for people to wrap their minds around. They, by and large, especially when kids have struggled, we don't want them to struggle anymore, right? We want to make things a little bit easier for them. But we know that rigorous curriculum really helps to grow kids academically. So, and when we think about what is a rigorous curriculum is based in truth. So when we think about things like history, we can't tell a whitewashed version of history and expect that to be rigorous. It's not. What is difficult is for kids to, and for adults to, and really engage with what truly transpired in our country. And because when you do that, when we engage with what truly transpired in our country, then we can begin to see our way clear to make some changes and to solve some problems, because we understand where those sort of the impetus of those problems. So that's one thing with regard to curriculum. It needs to be rigorous, and it needs to be based in truth. And also, one of the things that they're finding, I've been following the new superintendent up in Baltimore. Well, she's not that new anymore, superintendent in Baltimore. And one of the things that she did was she changed the curriculum such that it was based in truth and it was rigorous, and also that it elevated the history of Baltimore. Which and so when you think about the rich history that Pittsburgh has, kids can they begin to understand why this street is named thus and so, Wiley Avenue, right? Why what happened in the Hill District when the Civic Arena was built, like when kids and they can identify with it, because that's what they're living. And they can see how we got here. And that's one of the, I think, for when you look at history, social studies, even literature, one of the great questions is, how did we get here? And that's what, and so our curriculum has to be rigorous, based in truth. And also, I believe, have some personal connection, help kids to make some personal connection to their own lives.
Yeah. And what I'm thinking when you were answering was that also gives a child pride.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? That, like, I live in this community and this is why this is this way. This is why this street is, that gives a sense of pride,
Absolutely.
so thank you so much. Thank you for that. Now, a lot of, especially at the school district, you'll hear from time to time that parents is not doing their part in participating in with the school district. What would be your vision to pull them parents in and get them involved?
Yeah. So I told you that I worked in child protection. So I met a lot of parents who were not actually doing the best thing by their kids. And I can tell you to a person that they all wanted the very best for their kids. And oftentimes what we do is we look at how we show up and what we do for our kids and say that people who don't do that don't want for their kids what we want for our kids. And that's absolutely not the case. Most people, I mean, I know that there have to be people, I don't know them, but most people want the very, very best for their children. And they're doing, and the other thing is they're doing the best they can with what they have.
Yeah.
And so if we approach people in that way, I think we also have to recognize that in doing the best they can with what they have, they're exactly like you and me. Because we're doing the best we can with what we have, right?
Exactly.
They're exactly like the most affluent parent who's doing the best they can with what they have. They just might have more resources, but they're doing the best they can with those resources, right? And so all of us are doing that. What we have to do is recognize that in one another and stop judging families, judging parents for, oftentimes what we the issue that parents are struggling with is like poverty. The issue that a parent might be struggling with is having not, feeling disconnected from the school. When I was a high school teacher, I had a young man who was in the 11th, he was taking 11th grade English. He was actually a 12th grader, but he was taking 2 Englishes so he could graduate. And he would come to class and, he had various levels of engagement in class. When we talked about things, I taught English, when we talked about things related to history, social studies, he was very engaged. He could have, we could have conversations. When we talked about what he had read or what students were supposed to have read, he wasn't really engaged. So he just didn't do his homework. And so I, being a 22-year-old, 22-year-old brand new teacher, I said, I'm going to call his mother. Right. So I call his mother up and I was like, listen, he's doing this and he's doing that and blah, blah, blah. And she said, what do you want me to do about it? And I stood for a second and I thought like, what do I want her to do about it?
Yeah.
And so I said, well, when I was younger, if I did something, my parents would take something from me or whatever. And she said, he owns his own car, so I can't take that from him. It's his. He owns his own television. I can't take that from him. It's his. He helps pay bills in the house. So what is it that you want?
Yeah.
And so when I thought about it, I said, well, maybe you just show up. You just come to school and we have a conversation. But during that conversation, I said to her, when we're having these kind of conversations, he's super engaged. He's just brilliant in understanding politics and current events. And he just doesn't do his reading, right? And then he cuts up when he doesn't do his reading. And she said, what did you just say? So I repeated it. And she said, and that's the first time her son was in the 12th grade that any teacher had ever said, that any school person had ever said that he did something good. And like, that's what that's what parents are living with. And so we can't expect them to engage when the only thing they ever hear from schools is what's wrong with their kids. And by association, what's wrong with them.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that, everyone listening is hearing that you have said several times to make sure to accept the mom, the parent, the dad, the student, the child exactly where they are, which is extremely important. That is extremely important because it allows the person to be comfortable and again, go back to have pride in themselves. So thank you so much for that. My next question to you is, now a lot of families, a lot of people, a lot of schools are having a different opinion, or some have the same opinion about charter schools and about how they may be, not being fair. Or what's your take on charter schools?
Yeah, so that's thanks for that question. I get asked that question a lot. Full disclosure, I'm on the board of a charter school, and our district charter school students, there's about 5,000 of them. They're mostly Black. They're mostly low income, and their families are making the same decision that most families in Pittsburgh make. And that is, they are not choosing their neighborhood school for their kids. That is the vast majority of families in Pittsburgh do not send their children to their neighborhood school. And so that's what charter school families are doing, mostly Black, mostly low income. And yet we use this language like siphoning of public funds. When you think about who those charter school families are, they're tax-paying residents of Pittsburgh. So it feels to me, and what I found is that the narrative around charter schools has become really problematic because of the perceived threat that charters are to traditional public schooling. And when you think about what traditional public schooling is and who traditional public schools have served, then the question remains, why are we fighting so hard to maintain a system that has never served the vast majority of students, and certainly not students who look like you and me, and certainly not students in Pittsburgh? And so we have to ask ourselves, like, what are we really holding on to? I believe wholeheartedly in the great promise of public schooling. I think it is absolutely necessary. We've seen in the last few years what a lack of information, a lack of knowledge, a lack of being able to think critically does to our democracy. It is a threat to our democracy. And when you think about who these charter school families are, we have to stop having this us versus them conversation. Charter schools were created to be centers of innovation. They were created to be, hubs of innovative, to sort of incubate great ideas. What if we called on our charter schools to do that? What if we partnered with our charter schools, because they are district schools, they are public schools? What if we partnered with them and we really created a system whereby our charter schools could incubate some ideas, and those ideas could roll out to the rest of the district? That, I know that is like sort of, I'm Pollyanna. I know that's a Pollyanna view of how it could work. But these are, like I said, these are 5,000 mostly Black, mostly low income children. And the hatred of charter schools is damaging to them. And so I don't hate charter schools. I believe that there is that we can create great options, and so that every family has a great choice for either their neighborhood school, a magnet, a charter, whatever, and that's what I think is the goal. I know I've heard people say that our political action committee, this slate specifically, we want to destroy public schools and make everything a charter. That's absolutely crazy, because I would never, that is so far from anything that I would ever want to do, because I don't think charters are the answer. I don't think traditional public schools are the answer. I think great, high quality public schools that focus on kids, that know who they are, that respect their families, that is the answer. And irrespective of the whether it's a traditional district school, a charter school, a parochial school, a magnet school, whatever kind of school, that the answer is great schools for every kid. That's the only answer.
Yeah. So let me ask you, Tracey. So coming into if and when you get on the board, your change is to be looking toward the district and not changing the board, or is that vice versa?
Mm-hmm. I think it has to happen simultaneously. Like, I think that the only way that we're going to push any real change at our district level is to change our board. And I only say that, like, I think I like and respect every member of the school board. Mm-hmm. I just don't believe that they're doing they're pushing the district in the right direction. I think that, we have a slate of candidates that believes that the district needs to change drastically. Like, we need to be going in a different direction than we're going right now. Right now, we're making like tiny little incremental improvements, if that, in students' achievement. And there are places where we know that we can make more significant improvement in kids' academic, outcomes. We know that we can be a school district that is safer for kids. I mean, so many, especially Black kids, go to school, they get arrested at school. Like, we could be a place where that kind of thing would never happen. And so we believe, and I don't want to speak for the other members of the slate, but that what we're doing right now is not enough. It's not good enough, and not for our kids. That we need to do so much better by our kids. And I don't think that the rest of the board, that the current board necessarily believes that the direction that we're going in is not the right direction.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you said, that, like you said, it's not disrespect to anyone. It's just that what you have chose to do was, if you see, you have acknowledged a problem or several, and not just sit on the sideline and point fingers at what's wrong. What you choose to do and what you have chosen to do was get in a fight and try to implement your vision, of how to move districts further. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
And you were saying about, the safety and everything of the schools and the children, going to school, and some getting arrested and everything. So, and what's your vision for keeping the children and the teachers safe?
Yeah. So, and we know that is a climate thing. That's an environment thing. There are places where kids go to school every day, and there's no law enforcement in their schools. And they go to school and they're safe and their teachers are safe because that's what they've created. And I feel like what we do, we criminalize and we problematize the behavior of certain kids because of what they look like and how they show up at school. For example, the one, I've had lots of conversations with parents who have interfaced with the school around this notion of disrespect, right? Their kids are being disrespectful. And when you think about what respect is, it's a very culturally couched concept. It's not, disrespect is not anything that can be, that is like, that's the same across the board. What you and I believe is respectful or disrespectful might be very different from what other people do.
Right.
And
Right.
I think lots of times people, when children behave in ways that make teachers or other school adults uncomfortable, they say that that behavior is a problem, when the behavior may not be problematic on its face, but because it makes them uncomfortable, they say it's problematic. Now, I'm not talking about violence. I'm not talking about like, yelling at people or hitting people. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about interfacing with kids in ways that when they do certain things or say certain things that makes you feel uncomfortable, that oftentimes that's like the first step in labeling a kid as a problem.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what happens to lots of kids in schools. They do something that is perfectly reasonable in their own culture and not necessarily a problem in their own culture. And that thing gets called a problem. So then that kid is a problem. And then people begin to treat the kid like they're a problem. And what do you do? What do you do when you're treated a particular way? You act that way. And so I know that sounds like a very simple solution. It's not really a solution. It's just a different way of thinking about how we treat kids in schools every day. When I first moved back to Pittsburgh, I was going on a site visit to Pittsburgh Alderdice, which is the school in my neighborhood. And I got to the school and there are all these kids who are standing around waiting in line. And I'm like, what are they waiting for? And then I get up and I see that they're going through metal detectors. And so I put my bag down and I go, and I've been through metal detectors at the airport or metal detectors to go to the county, the county, courthouse or whatever. But I had never been to a school where there was a metal detector. And so you walk through the metal detector, you put your bag down, somebody looks in your bag and you walk through the metal detector. And I stood there for a second and I thought, what does it say to a kid about where they're going and who they are and how they're interfacing in the world when you get to a school, when you get there, you have to be checked to make sure you're not doing anything wrong. Now I don't know how many horrible things had to happen before metal detectors were placed in, but I just know that like we have to begin to rethink what environments we're creating for kids.
Yeah. And if I'm not going to mention the school because I'm not sure, but I remember someone had told me that it's in a K to 6 or something, like kindergartens or kindergartners are going through a metal detector. So wow. Thank you.
And a lot of people say that's to protect the kids from the community outside. And there's some validity to that, to protect kids and teachers from the community outside. But I don't know. I just wonder,
Yeah.
could we do something different?
Yeah. Now, Tracey, let me ask you. So, talking about race in our schools, is that something that the board should implement in the curriculum? And I'm talking for the teachers down to the students. Is that something that should be implemented from the board, or is that something that each school themselves should come up with their own race program or race, how to tackle and address racism in our schools?
Right. So one of the things that I've learned recently, just in reading, is that the more we have conversations about the systemic nature of racism and not like you're racist against me, or you said this offensive thing to me, not like that. But the more we have conversations about the systemic nature of racism, the more that young people can think about what the concept is. They see it play out in different ways. And like you were talking about earlier, how they can feel pride at certain things. People, when they understand the systemic nature of racism, then they stop blaming themselves and their families for, and their entire communities for a set of circumstances over which they had little control. So that's the first thing. Like we definitely need to start talking about the systemic nature of racism. That's the only thing that's going to help to reverse some of the issues that racism has wrought on our schools and society at large. I believe that has to come from the very top. I think that the central office, that teachers need to be trained and administrators need to be trained, and to have the very difficult conversations about what racism is, what it looks like, how it manifests itself. And that's very hard to talk about. What does racism look like every day in our lives, right? And so that's part of, I think that those conversations, those, sort of how do we couch this, this sort of really complicated, huge issue? How do we sort of frame it in a way that it can go into our schools in ways that are meaningful? Because oftentimes we have, conversations about race that are incredibly superficial, and that's just not helpful. That does not address the institution of racism, superficial conversations. And so in order to stop doing that, then it needs to happen all the time throughout our district, and it has to start at the very top.
Yeah. And you know what? I like when you said it has to be consistent, because consistency brings a pattern. That's when you start acting out with this consistent, something that is extremely consistent. That's when our youth and our teachers from the top, like you said, it has to come from the top. But if it's consistent all the way around, that's why I'm glad I asked you that. And I'm thank you so much for your question, because what happens is, like you said, is, this district may do something different than this district. And now we have one superficial and one heart to heart, and that's not going to help. Right. You know what I'm saying? So thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. So let me ask you, we're going to wind down a little bit. So let me ask you this question before, on the top of my head. How do you think the curriculum is setting our youth for the future, for their future? And if it's nothing that needs to be changed, great. And if it's something that do need to be changed to set our young men and women for the future, what should that be?
So I think it goes back to that conversation about like a rigorous curriculum, kids doing hard work that is personally meaningful, that they have some personal connection to, or they have some interest in, or we've created an interest for them in that particular thing. And it has to have, and it has to be based on what's true and what's real. And, for me, that's the curriculum, right? So we have to, for example, I taught high school English. We have to move beyond just the sort of what we say is American literature to also include Black authors, to also include Latinx authors, to also include LGBTQI authors. So we have to, and not in a sort of, oftentimes, like when we include other people, it's sort of as oh, look at us, we're doing this great thing by including them. But it isn't in a way that
Mm.
lets kids understand that this is the diversity of our population. This is the diversity of experience. This is the diversity of thought. This is the diversity of expression. So, but we have to include voices in meaningful ways, and then we have to, when we talk about rigor, we have to ask really tough questions about the inclusion of those voices. So if this is the experience of a young person with exceptionalities, who wrote this poem, then what does that mean for us when we go to school tomorrow, right? What does that mean for us when we go home? What does it mean in our lives that another human being has had this experience, painful, joyful, whatever, but what does it mean in our lives that this human being has had this experience? And without that deep and meaningful inclusion, that doesn't just seem like oftentimes it's performative, that's not performative, that actually speaks to the fact that we're a collection of individuals, and we have some shared and some very different experiences, and this is how they get expressed. That's what we need to do with curriculum. We need to make sure it's real, it's based on truth, real science, all of that, and that it's connected, and that is rigorous. Like, kids can do really hard work, hard intellectual work. They can. We just have to give them all the tools they need to do it, and really push them to do it.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. And I think I keep hearing, like, you have done a lot you have done a lot of teaching. You have done a lot of, you have done a lot. I hear what you have started. You was like 22, you were a teacher, and you have done a lot. So, and I thank you so much for that. Now, let me ask you my question, Tracey. You're running for Pittsburgh Public School Board District 5. Tell us, why you?
Well, like I said before, I was a high school English teacher. I worked in a school we had lots of academic tracks. I saw how kids within the same school building have very, very different kind of schooling experiences. I saw how brilliant kids got turned out of school for exclusionary disciplinary practices. I saw all of that in my 3 short years of teaching at a relatively, it was one of the inner city schools, but it was a small town. So I have that experience. I know what goes on in schools, and not from just an observatory kind of way. Like, I've actually lived in that and experienced that. I have studied education. I've read books and had talks and, all of that, went to conferences and all of that. So I spend a lot of time thinking about education. And then finally, that experience of mine at Beltsover Elementary School, where we were pushed to do really hard work, and we were high achieving Black low income elementary school, lets me know that is possible.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for that. Now, if couple more questions, 1 or 2 more questions. Sure. One of them is that if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, they may want to carry on the conversation that we have been talking about, or they may have their own questions that they want to ask you, or they may even want to help you on your campaign. But before you answer that, can you tell us one more time what communities and schools consist of Pittsburgh Public School Board District 5?
Okay, so I'm going to get it right this time. So, neighborhoods of Lincoln Place, Greenfield, Hazelwood, Somerset, Swiss Helm Park, Glen Hazel, and then sliver of Southside, South and Central Oakland, and South Squirrel Hill. And it includes just 3 schools: Greenfield, Mifflin, and Minnedale.
Okay, okay. So that's the, ladies and gentlemen, that's the communities that should want to hear what you have to say, want to hear what your vision is, and want to know who you are. Now, going back to the question that I asked, sure. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, to talk, to elaborate or ask their own questions or even help you on your campaign, how can somebody get in touch with you?
So my email address is Tracey, Tracey, 4 district 5 at gmail.com. And I'm going to put it in the chat. Will people be able to see the chat?
I think, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Tracey 4 district 5 at gmail.com.
Let me see. I think because my assistant, I'm not going to open up nothing because I'll be done shut something down. So I'm not going to open up nothing. So I'm going to repeat it to ladies and gentlemen. It is Tracey, Tracey, 4 district 5 at gmail.com. Mm-hmm. That is how you can get in touch with her. And Tracey, I cannot thank you enough.
Oh, it's been great.
Yes, yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, Tracey Reed. She is running for Pittsburgh Public School Board, District 5. If you have anything that you would like to ask her, please reach out. If you'd like to help her with her campaign, please reach out. Or if you want to elaborate on some conversations that Tracey and I had today, please reach out. Tracey Reed, running for Pittsburgh Public School, District 5. Thank you so much.
Thank
Blessed
you.
and Power thanks you. And thank you for coming and educating us at our Educational Community Civic Series.
It was great. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Is there anything that you would like to say before we wrap up this afternoon?
Just that I'm also on Facebook, and that's Tracey 4 PPS on Facebook. And you can also get my contact information through Black Women for a Better Education.
Okay, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Tracey. I cannot thank you enough. Hope to have you back. And because so much happens and everything, like you said, everything changes. Some things may be coming up new. So thank you so much for blessing us with your presence.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.